الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد. In our previous class, we were reading what the author he mentioned, rahimahullah ta'ala, with regards to الشرط التاسع, الشرط التاسع, the ninth condition. The author he mentioned النية, that it is the intention. ومحلها القلب والتلفظ بها بدعة. And the author he mentioned rahimahullah, and the place for the intention is in the heart, and to pronounce it on the tongue is an innovation. والدليل الحديث, and the evidence for this is the narration إنما الأعمال بالنيات وإنما لكل امرئ ما نوى, that indeed the actions are by way of the intentions, and every individual will have what he has intended. And every individual he will have what he has intended. We have seen in the previous class that the function of the intention is to distinguish and to identify. The function of the intention in general and specifically in the legislation is to identify and to distinguish things. وظيفة النية التمييز والتعيين, to distinguish affairs and to identify them. We have seen that from here. The people of knowledge, they mentioned that النية نوعان, that the intention is two types. The intention is two types. نية المعمول له, نية المعمول له, the intention of the one whom the action is performed for. The intention of the one whom the action is performed for. نية المعمول له, the intention of the one whom the action is performed for. This is also known as نية التقرب, the niyyah of seeking nearness, and it is also known as al-ikhlas, the intention of sincerity and purity, any purity in the intention, that one he will perform the action sincerely and purely and only for Allah Azza wa Jal, and this is a condition for the correctness of every action, and in the text of the Quran and the Sunnah, many times this intention will be referred to as a niyyah, like in this narration here. Other times it will be mentioned as al-ibtigha, or even al-irada, or even sometimes the word al-ham will be used. But what is intended is al-ikhlas, and to seek the pleasure and the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So all of these terms here that come in the book and in the Sunnah, what is intended by them is this intention here. Ibtigha'a mardatillah, seeking the pleasure of Allah, intending the pleasure of Allah. Ibtigha'a wajhillah, seeking the face of Allah. Yabtaghi wajha Allah, seeking the face of Allah. Man yuridu al-akhirah wa sa'alaha sa'yaha, the one who wants the hereafter, the irada. What is intended here is the intention. And the person, he will have what he has intended. So the one who intends the pure intention, the intention of al-ikhlas, then this will be for the sake of Allah. Then this will be an action that will be accepted if it's likewise coupled with the fact that the action is performed in the legislated manner outwardly. Well, the point now in the reminder is that this intention here, it has a number of terms referring to that. From that, al-ikhlas. From that, an-niyyah. From that, al-ibtigha. And from that, likewise, al-ham. Like in the hadith of Anas. Radiallahu anhu, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Man kanat al-akhirah hammahu. Jama'a Allahu lahu shamlahu. Wa ja'ala ghinahu fi qalbihi. Wa atatu dunya wa hiya raghima, al-hadith. Man kanat al-akhiratu hammahu. In other wordings of this narration, likewise, Man kanat al-akhiratu niyatahu. Whoever his ham is the hereafter, then Allah will gather his affairs for him, and Allah will place contentment in his heart, place contentment and satisfaction with the decree of Allah and the provision of Allah in his heart, and the worldly life will come to him submissively. Until the end of the hadith. The shahid is that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, whoever makes the hereafter his ham. In other wordings, whoever makes the hereafter his niyyah, his intention. So what is intended here is to intend the pleasure of Allah, the reward of Allah, the hereafter, the actions that are for the hereafter, meaning to draw near to Allah Azza wa Jalla and seek His pleasure in the home of the hereafter, to be admitted into paradise, to be admitted into Jannah, to be safe from the hellfire, to have the pleasure of Allah and be safe from His anger, Tabaraka wa ta'ala, and to be blessed from those who see the face of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is called al-ikhlas, niyatul ma'mulillah. And this one is the intention that requires mujahada. It requires to be diligent and striving against oneself and purifying one's intention and looking into the reason why a person is moving and the reason why a person is acting and why is he performing the actions, and to seek the weakness in that intention and the deficiency and hope to rectify that, all the while seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this has proceeded. But what is intended whenever the fuqaha, they mention the issue of a niyyah like here, then generally what is being referred to is niyyatul amal, the other aspect of the niyyah. Niyyatul amal. I know this is a review for us from our previous class, but it's of utmost importance. And likewise, it is from the greatest means to have benefit in one's life, yani in the dunya before the hereafter. To understand the affair of the intention and how to benefit from the intention and how to strive to perfect the intention and to make it purely and sincerely for the sake of Allah. And likewise to identify the weaknesses that can come into the intention and how to avoid that or to purify that whenever it comes. And then likewise how to identify these actions of worship and perform them properly. So the second type of intention, niyatul amal. Niyatul amal. This is the intention of the action itself. So again, the function of the intention, wazifatun niyya at-tamyiz wa at-ta'yin. At-tamyiz wa at-ta'yin. So the function of the intention is to distinguish and to identify. So in the first aspect, the person, he would identify that he's performing the action for Allah alone. He's performing the action for Allah alone. He will distinguish between these affairs. In the first aspect, niyatul ma'mulillah, then he will identify and he will distinguish between all of these things in this life. He can have the pleasure of the people, he can have praise from the people, he can have status and rank in the hearts of the people, he can turn the faces of the people to him, to smile at him and like him and to be kind to him and the likes like this, or he can seek the pleasure of Allah in the face of Allah. The pleasure of Allah in the face of Allah. So now he will purify his intention and turn away from this worldly life and devote himself to Allah Azza wa Jalla and purify that and make it sincerely for the pleasure of Allah. Sincerely for the pleasure of Allah. So now he has identified this affair. Now his intention is focused and now it has any direction and aim and it's pure and clean. And that is with the fact that he's only hoping for the reward of Allah and fearing that his action may not be accepted and that Allah will reject his deed. And that Allah will reject his deed, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So again, the intention is identifying this issue and distinguishing between these affairs. A person now, he only wants the pleasure of Allah. So now this is how to perform that. And this is a general intention encompassing the life of a believer, but he must strive more diligently at the time of performing every action of worship. Drawing to mind this intention here. Because even sometimes a person, he could be sincere from the aspect he's not showing off and he's not hoping for a reward from the worldly life, but he has deficiency in another aspect of the intention, and that is to be focused on what he's doing. And that is to be focused on what he's doing. Maybe he will not necessarily be showing off or having a bad intention from the aspect of riya or sum'ah, wanting to be heard or wanting the worldly life, but he's not focusing on the aim and the goal, and therefore his intention still becomes corrupted from another aspect, and that's heedlessness. And this also goes back to attachment to the worldly life. Attachment to the worldly life. So he's supposed to be in the prayer, for example, and the prayer is an action of worship, and the heart is supposed to be alive worshiping Allah. But if it's preoccupied with the worldly affair, now his intention has become disturbed. It's become distracted. It's not focused. It's not focused on the action at hand and mastering the action of worship. So this requires a great mujahada. So at the time of performing the worship, a person, he should strive against himself to master that and perfect it, beginning with the intention, remembering Allah and His blessings and His favors, remembering Allah and His greatness and His mercy, remembering Allah and His power and authority, remembering Allah and His deen and His legislation and His halal and haram, remembering Allah Azza wa Jalla and His punishment for those who disbelieve or disobey Him, remembering the meeting of Allah and the standing before Allah and the accountability, and remembering likewise one's deficiency and shortcomings in his life, showing thanks and being grateful with regards to those blessings. So therefore now he will worship Allah with his heart, and he will focus, and he will make the intention purity for Allah and sincerity for Allah. And along with that, he will not be heedless. And along with that, he will not be heedless and negligent. Heedless and negligent. Then the second aspect of this intention, again, is niyatu al-amal. Say likewise to identify. Likewise, this is to identify and to distinguish. So now it's distinguishing the action, because the actions are different types. Some actions are actions of worship. They're called ibadat. They're actions of worship, actions to draw near to Allah. A'mal al-akhirah, deeds of the hereafter. Deeds of the hereafter. And the reason for doing them is seeking a reward in the hereafter, the pleasure of Allah alone. The pleasure of Allah alone, even if a person he receives some worldly gain from that. Even if a person he receives some worldly gain from that, that's not his intention. That's not his intention. Many times a person who perform actions of worship, and likewise he will benefit in his worldly life. He will benefit as well in his worldly life from that, from a number of aspects. But the whole purpose and goal is to seek their reward from Allah in the hereafter. So therefore the intention distinguishes between that and between the adat, and between the customs. Between the customs. Some people, they're so heedless and negligent with regards to the intention that they turn the ibadat into adat. That the ibadat in their right become adat. The ibadat, the actions of worship, they become like customs. They become like customs, and they perform them heedlessly, and they perform them in mechanical order and motion. They pray daily, but the benefit of the prayer in their life is little to nothing, because of the fact that their heart is heedless while they're praying. Or they fast Ramadan after Ramadan, but the benefit from that likewise is little to nothing, because they're fasting heedlessly, and they're not remembering Allah Azza wa Jal, and they're not hoping for His reward or fearing His punishment. They're just moving through the actions of worship like customs. And this is whenever the heart becomes sick. The heart becomes sick and heedless of the remembrance of Allah. Maybe a person is literally remembering Allah, but he does not even remember Allah. For example, he'll say Allahu Akbar and enter the prayer, but his heart is not thinking of Allah whatsoever. His heart is not attached to Allah whatsoever. His heart is not glorifying Allah whatsoever. Rather, his heart is attached to some issue in the worldly life. Something from this worldly life is what he's thinking about, and what his heart is attached to at the very moment his tongue is saying Allahu Akbar. So now the actions of ibadah in his right, because of this great heedlessness and negligence, has become like an everyday action. So this is great failure. Waliyadhu billah. A person he should strive to avoid this characteristic and trait. This is from the attributes of the hypocrites, even if they pray. وَلَا يَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. Then whenever they pray, they don't remember Allah except for a little bit. Meaning they barely remember Allah whenever they're praying. And the whole purpose of the prayer is to remember Allah. وَأَقِيمِ الصَّلَاةَ لِذِكْرِي. So this is a mistake and an error, and something that we should strive to avoid and stay away from, and to rectify. Not making the actions of worship like daily actions. This is from that intention that goes back to the previous issue of niyatul taqarrub, or niyatul ma'mulillah. To learn that and to make it good, and to perfect it to the best of one's ability. But the one who is given success, he's the opposite to that which has preceded, and he will make the adat to ibadat. By understanding the issue of the niyyah, he will make the adat into ibadat. He will make the everyday affairs into actions of worship. Everyday affairs like eating and drinking, and smiling in the face of his family and his brothers and the likes like this. He will take advantage of this intention and the mercy and the grace of Allah Azza wa Jal, and he will turn these everyday affairs into means of drawing near to Allah. Eating and drinking, he will eat with the intention to strengthen himself and to gain the energy that he needs to perform the obligations that are upon him, and to worship Allah in the best manner, fulfilling the rights that are upon him so long as he's alive, and to eat from that which is lawful and permissible for him and good and wholesome. And likewise, he will remember the name of Allah and eat with his right hand, all in this manner like this, and he will eat and taking his full and leaving space for his drink, and likewise for his breath, as the Prophet ﷺ has mentioned. All of these affairs, now with this intention and these actions here, with this knowledge, now this eating becomes a means of worship for him. So now every time he eats, in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening time, even if he's hungry, he needs a snack. He's not just going to do this following his desires. He remember that he needs to take some energy. He needs this snack because Allah has made this a means to have energy and strength so he can continue. Maybe he's feeling weak. Maybe he's not able to perform his obligations good. If he didn't eat something or take a snack or a drink and the likes like this, he'll be weak in performing Salat al-Asr, for example, or Salat al-Maghrib, for example, or even any other obligations that are upon him throughout the day. So now he eats with this intention to remember Allah, remembering the name of Allah, eating upon the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ with this intention. Now every time he's eating, it becomes an action of worship for him. It becomes a means of seeking nearness to Allah Azza wa Jal. It becomes a means of seeking nearness to Allah Azza wa Jal. Likewise, whenever he's sleeping with this intention. Even if he's having relations with his wife or the woman with her husband, in order to keep the wife chaste and the husband chaste, and to keep them free from fitna and trials, and to calm down those desires so that they are checked and they are placed in their proper place that's lawful and legislated, to keep them far away from sin. To have this intention. Maybe a woman, she's not even interested, but she will have this intention. With this intention, she can fulfill that right, and also help her husband, and also draw near to her Lord. And likewise, maybe the husband the same way, and it goes both ways. So the point is, with this intention, now even these actions here that a person, he himself is enjoying, become means to seek the pleasure of Allah. Become means to seek the pleasure of Allah. This was the life of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this was his life. His life was in the pleasure of Allah. It was in the pleasure of Allah. All of his life is like this. And the more of the sunan that we memorize and learn, especially from the adhkar and the ad'iyah, we'll find it's like this. Wherever he's going, every aspect in life, he's remembering Allah from the time he woke up, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, until the time he goes to bed. Whenever he puts on his clothes, he remembers Allah, the favor of Allah, the blessing of Allah. He's covering his awrah, because this is an obligation of Allah, and he's putting on this garment and praising Allah, knowing that this is the blessing of Allah upon him, and the likes like this. And now all of this becomes actions of worship, and he's doing this daily. Great opportunity for a believer. Allah, he says, قُلْ إِنَّ الصَّلَاةِ وَنُسُكِي وَمَحْيَايَ وَمَمَاتِي لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ لَا شَرِيكَ لَهُ وَبِذَلِكَ أُمِرْتُ وَأَنَا أَوَّلُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. Say, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, إِنَّ صَلَاتِي وَنُسُكِي وَمَحْيَايَ وَمَمَاتِي لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. Say to them that indeed my prayer and my slaughtering, my sacrificial animal that I slaughter, the sacrificial animal that I slaughter, and my life and my death is for Allah. And my life and my death is for Allah, the Lord of the worlds, the Lord of the worlds. And indeed, he's the best role model. Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. All of this is from the intention. All of this is learning, and it comes about in the life of a believer by learning the intention, learning how to benefit from the intention. So the one who is wise and the one who is given success, he will take advantage of his life and take advantage of his time and take advantage of his days and nights and the remembrance of Allah, and he will turn these everyday customs into opportunities to draw near to Allah. And the one who is close to Allah Azza wa Jal, he has a vast portion of mercy and help and aid and support. And this is what it means to be close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, close to his help and his mercy and his aid and his tawfiq and success, and that Allah will protect the person and take charge of his affairs for him and facilitate for him and make ways out for him and make things easy for him and not difficult, and even in times of difficulty to make it facilitated by having contentment, and then by giving him relief from places he could not even expect. All of these are from the great rewards of those who are near to Allah. Those who are near to Allah. وَرَحْمَةُ اللَّهِ قَرِيبٌ مِنَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. And إِنَّ رَحْمَةَ اللَّهِ قَرِيبٌ مِنَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. And indeed, the mercy of Allah is very near those who do good. Those who do good. So from that aspect is to have this intention. So the niyatul amal, now along with the niyatul ma'mulillah, it can be very beneficial. It can be very beneficial. So this is a means to distinguish. So the niyatul amal again is going to distinguish between these affairs. Distinguishing between the ibadat and the adat. Distinguishing between the ibadat and the adat. Between the actions of worship and between that which is that which is customs. Between the actions of worship and the actions that are customs and ordinary affairs. And likewise, even from the ordinary affairs, it's the intention that's going to really have a great effect in the person's life. Because even from the worldly life, there are things that are allowed and permissible and things that are haram. And the person who is outwardly doing something permissible, but his intention is something haram and forbidden, then he will be held accountable for that. Somebody, for example, who divorces his wife time after time, and the likes like this, and then he'll take her back. He'll divorce her, which is lawful and allowed. which is lawful and allowed, and then he'll await the period, which is lawful and allowed, and then he'll take her back, and he'll keep doing this and delaying her. But he doesn't want to take her back, he just wants to keep her hanging there. His intention is to harm her. His intention is to harm her, to divorce her one time and make her wait for a period. And then whenever it's time again, wait for some time, divorce her again, make her wait for a period. And it's to keep her in hardship and to keep her in oppression. So outwardly it's allowed for him to do these affairs, but with his foul intention, وَلِيَعْذُ بِاللَّهِ, this is something that's not permissible. This is something that will earn the anger of Allah. So even here in the worldly affairs, then a person, it's still very important to understand the issue of the intention. Even a person, for example, if he took a drink of something, and he thought that it was impermissible. He thought it was impermissible. And he pursued that with his intention. And he drank from that. And come to find out it's something lawful. He will still be held accountable for his intention. We have seen the example of that previously. Somebody who was walking down the street and he's seen a case of Budweiser. And he looks around and he's seen that nobody's looking, so he snatches it up and runs into his house. He's seen the case of Budweiser, because this is alcohol. So he sees that nobody's looking, so he takes it in his home. And then whenever he is alone, he is desiring and wanting to get drunk. So therefore he starts to drink it. After he drinks 2 or 3 of them, he's not feeling anything. Then he takes a closer look at the package and it says non-alcoholic. 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 What is the case of this person? إنما الأعمال بالنيات وإنما لكل امرئ ما نوى. Every sip is a sin. Every sip is a sin. Every action in that step until that is a sin. All of those sips that he had taken is a sin. The hiding that he's doing of that drink and sneaking it into his house and then sipping it time after time with this intention, this is a great sin. This is a great sin, and he's not drinking anything except for any of that which is lawful. So it's lawful, and if a person wanted to drink the non-alcoholic beverage, it's a law for him. This is not any haram. So what got him? His heart. This is his heart got him where he's at. This is what led him to that failure. وَلِيَعْذُ بِاللَّهِ is what is in his heart. Sahih Muslim from the hadith of Abi Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Inna Allah la yanzuru ila suwarikum wa amwalikum, wa innama yanzuru ila qulubikum wa a'malikum." That indeed Allah, He does not look to your shapes, the shapes of your body, and to your wealth, and who has more money, who has stronger, who is more healthy, and the likes of who is more affluent. Allah, He's not looking at this aspect, and meaning the look of accountability. The look of accountability and the look of mercy. This is not what Allah has created us for. So what He's looking at, meaning where we're held accountable for, is in our hearts and in our actions. But Allah, He looks to your hearts and He looks to your actions. He looks to your hearts and He looks to your actions. So therefore the intention is very important. Even some of the people of knowledge have made another example, any contrary to that. Maybe a person, he thought something was halal and he advanced upon that and come to find out it was haram, but he did not know. For example, he was visiting a family member. Maybe they're non-Muslims, for example. And there happens to be a cup on the table. And then he reached over and took a drink. And then it's alcohol. But he did not think that it's alcohol. He figured everybody he's drinking water, or he had water in front of him and then somebody put it there, or the cups got mixed. In any case, he did not know and he did not intend that. He did not intend that. So therefore, there's no sin upon him. Because the deeds are by way of the intention. So even in the worldly affairs, a person, he will have to be able to use his intention in the proper manner and to stay inside the limits. Of Allah Azza wa Jal, even in performing the lawful, that which is lawful, or to avoid that which is haram, to stay inside the hudud of Allah, the limits of Allah Azza wa Jal. This requires a great intention and a great effort, likewise with that intention, to implement that. But what is intended here is to distinguish the actions, the actions of worship, distinguishing the actions of worship, niyatul amal. To distinguish the actions of worship. And what we've seen in our previous class, likewise with this intention here, niyatu al-amali, niyya fi salat, to distinguish the salat, to intend to pray salat, to intend to pray salat, that a person, his intention is certain and it is to pray Salah. And then if it's a specific Salah, he has to identify that specific Salah likewise. So the intention is going to identify the actions of worship. So some of the actions of worship are obligatory. Some of the actions of worship are obligatory. And some of the actions of worship are recommended. Some of the actions of worship are obligatory. Some of the actions of worship, some of the actions of worship, they're recommended. Some of them are more emphasized than others. Some of the actions of worship are not obligatory, but they're specific. And other actions of worship are not obligatory, and they're just in an absolute manner. So, therefore, the intention is going to identify these affairs. With regards to the salat the people of knowledge, they mention, is three different types. And this is important with regards to the intention. The faridah, the obligatory prayer, and then the nafil. The nafil, or the an-nafila al-mutlaqa. An-nafil al-mutlaq. The one that is an-nafil al-mutlaq. And the one that is nafil al-mu'ayyin. So we have the obligatory prayer, and then we have the non-obligatory prayer. The non-obligatory prayer is two types. An absolute non-obligatory prayer, any meaning it's just a non-obligatory prayer with no reason or no time ascribed to it, or no reason ascribed to it and no specific time. It's just a prayer only. It's called nafil al-mutlaq. Then there's another type of non-obligatory prayer which is specific. It's a specific type of non-obligatory prayer, like the sunnah of fajr, or the sunnah of dhuhr, or the sunnah of maghrib or isha, or like the witr, or like the duha, or like tahiyyat al-masjid, or like al-istikhara, and the likes like this, or other than that from these sunan, non-obligatory prayers that have specific reasons. Some of them have specific reasons, and others have specific reasons and times. They're coupled to a reason and a time. Then there are other types of prayers that are non-obligatory, but it's just in an absolute sense. A person, he's not praying for any specific reason or time, or any specific any reward. He's just praying. Like, for example, somebody right now, and if they were at home, for example, or they're not in class, and they want to pray between Maghrib and Isha, he can just stand up and pray. If he already prayed the sunnah of Maghrib, after that he can pray non-obligatory prayer. He would have the intention to pray. That's the only intention he'll have. He'll have the intention to pray. He'll pray 2 rak'ah, 4 rak'ah, 6 rak'ah, whatever he likes to pray until Isha comes in. That's a lot for him. So this prayer here is called an-nafil al-mutlaq. This is non-obligatory, absolute non-obligatory prayer, meaning it's not for any reason, or it's not for any specific reason or specific time. This type of prayer, لا تضاف إلى شيء. لا تضاف إلى شيء. It's not ascribed to anything. It's not ascribed to a reason or a time. So it's called mutlaq, absolute. Then the other one is an-nafil al-mu'ayyin. And this is the one that's ascribed to something. It's specific. Salat al-layl, salat al-witr, salat al-duha, ratiba al-fajr, ratiba al-dhuhr, like this. These prayers, salat al-istikhara, salat rak'ata al-tawaf, for example. These are prayers that have specific reasons, and some of them likewise specific times, or even places. But they're not obligatory. So now we can picture in our mind these affairs. The obligatory prayer, there are five. The Fajr, the Dhuhr, the Asr, the Maghrib, and the Isha. These are the obligatory prayers, 5 of them. So the one who's going to pray one of these prayers, he has to identify with his intention. Which prayer he's praying. That's what we're talking about here. Ash-shawtu tasi an-niyya. That's what the author is referring to now, niyyatul amal. And he has to identify the obligatory prayer. Is it Fajr or is it Dhuhr? Is it Fajr or is it Dhuhr? Is it Dhuhr? Is it Asr? Is it Asr? Is it Maghrib? Is it Maghrib? Is it Isha? It has to be identified. If somebody intended to pray Dhuhr and it's really Asr, he made a mistake, the prayer will not be accepted, because the intention is a sharut, is a condition. Is a condition for the correctness of the prayer. If the intention is not correct, the prayer is not correct. If the intention is not correct, the prayer is not correct. So then he has to identify that. So the way to identify the obligatory prayer is to intend to pray that obligatory prayer. The way to identify Fajr is to intend to pray Fajr. The way to identify Dhuhr is to intend to pray Dhuhr. Asr, Maghrib, Isha, the same way. There's another way the people of knowledge, they mention also to identify the obligatory prayer. To identify the obligatory prayer. Maybe at the time of entering into the prayer and the likes, it doesn't come to his mind. For example, Fajr. A believer, he wants to pray the Fajr prayer in the morning time. The Fajr prayer in the morning time. Possibly sometime a person is moving around and he's going through his life and he's not necessarily thinking of Fajr itself. He's not necessarily thinking of Fajr itself, but he knows at Fajr time that it's time for the obligatory prayer. So he gets up and he makes wudu and he leaves his house. He comes to the masjid to pray the obligatory prayer. So this likewise is sufficient as an intention for the obligatory prayer, because now it's at Fajr time and his intention is to pray the obligation of that time. So the reason why he's standing, the reason why he made wudu, the reason why he's facing the qibla, the reason why he's ready to pray is because it's an obligatory prayer of the particular time that he's aware of and he knows. So even if it was not on his mind exactly that this is Fajr prayer, but it's in his mind that he's praying the obligation of the time, farad al-waqt, this is what he's intending in his heart, then it's correct and sufficient. So a person, he shouldn't go into great hardship and difficulty with this. Sometimes he'll make takbir and then he'll make takbir again. I forgot to make the intention because he forgot to think about Fajr itself. Or he forgot to think about Fajr itself. But the whole reason he came there at this time, even the one who forgot, if he made takbir and then he prayed and everything like this, when you're finished, what were you just doing? What will he say? I just prayed Fajr. Even on the way here, where if you on the way here, you say, what are you doing? So I'm going to pray Fajr. Now he brought it to his mind because he was asked. But that's the whole reason why he got up. That's the whole reason why he left his home. That's the whole reason why he made wudu. That's the whole reason why he's going to pray, because it's Fajr. So no doubt to identify that and to know that it's Fajr and to intend Fajr specifically, this is very clear. But even if a person he were to intend the obligation of the time and to pray in that time, then this is sufficient for his intention. Alhamdulillah. He has identified the obligatory prayer by identifying its time. Unless he made a mistake and he intended to pray the wrong prayer in the wrong time. Unless he made a mistake and then he intended to pray the wrong prayer in the wrong time, now this will not suffice. Even if in his mind and he made a mistake, for example, he slept and he didn't pray Dhuhr. He forgot it's Asr time, so he's coming to the masjid to pray the obligatory prayer of the time, and then he's thinking that it's Dhuhr, for example, in his mind, and then he made a mistake. He realized that it's Asr after he made the intention. Now the prayer is not correct because he intended the wrong prayer. So he wouldn't be able to say here, oh, he intended the prayer of the time, or if it's Dhuhr time and then he intended Asr on accident. It's Dhuhr time, he intended Asr on accident, for example. And then we wouldn't say here, oh, well, you intended the prayer of the time. No, at this time, because he made a mistake, he actually intended something wrong. He actually identified the wrong prayer in his intention. Now it has to be corrected. So this is how to identify the obligatory prayer. As for the non-obligatory prayer, then the specific one is similar like that. The specific prayer has to be identified likewise. It has to be identified likewise. If a person is going to pray 2 rak'ah, non-obligatory prayer. If he wants to pray the sunnah of Fajr, he has to identify that. That's why he's praying that. If he's praying Tahiyyat al-Masjid, he has to identify that. He's praying the sunnah of wudu, he has to identify that. If he's praying istikhara, he has to identify that. So the one that's specific, it has to have the intention identifying that specific prayer from the beginning. Somebody, for example, came in the masjid and he started praying the sunnah of entering the masjid, and then he realized that he forgot to pray the sunnah of Fajr at home. He came at Fajr time, for example. Normally maybe he prays the sunnah of Fajr at home, for example, and then he came to the masjid this morning and he forgot that he didn't pray the sunnah of Fajr at home. But when he came in, he started praying Tahiyyat al-Masjid. In his mind, that's what he entered. He entered the masjid, he's praying Tahiyyat al-Masjid. And then after he made takbir, he remembered, subhanAllah, I forgot to pray the sunnah of Fajr at the house. I didn't pray that yet. So then he's not allowed to just change the intention, because it's a specific prayer. The specific prayer, it has to have the intention from the beginning to the end. It has to have the intention from the beginning to the end. As for the non-specific obligatory prayer, then it's allowed. It's allowed because it's just the intention to pray. So from here we see what the people of knowledge, they mentioned, having the intention, changing the intention from one to another. It's not allowed to change the intention from one obligation to another obligation. It's not allowed to change the intention after starting the prayer from one obligatory prayer to another. If a person, for example, he started praying the Asr prayer, and then in the middle of Asr prayer, he remembered that he did not pray the Dhuhr prayer. He completely forgot, and at that time he remembered. And after making the Takbirat al-Ihram for Asr, he remembered, subhanAllah, I didn't pray Dhuhr prayer today. So now he cannot change his intention to Dhuhr. If he changed his intention to Dhuhr, now in doing that, the Asr prayer is invalidated. By changing his intention and leaving the intention of Asr, the Asr prayer now is invalidated. And likewise, the Dhuhr prayer does not even start, because the Dhuhr prayer is an obligatory prayer, and one he must intend that from the very beginning. Because intention here is a condition. The intention is a condition. If he started to pray Asr, and then he changed his intention to Dhuhr, at this time the Asr prayer is invalidated. And likewise, the Dhuhr prayer does not even start. So therefore he has to start over from the beginning. He has to start over from the beginning. If he continued, it will not count. He does not have Dhuhr and he does not have Asr. He does not have Dhuhr and he does not have Asr. His Asr was invalidated whenever he notified the intention. And the Dhuhr never even started, because you can't start to pray Dhuhr in the middle of a prayer. Dhuhr is a prayer that has specific amount of units, and it has to, one he must intend from the beginning to the end. One he must intend from the beginning to the end. So this person, in reality, his prayer has been nullified. Whether he's moving or not, his prayer is nullified. So the obligation for him is to start over with the intention of Dhuhr. With the intention of Dhuhr. You understand this? This is for the one who changed his intention from one obligation to another obligation in the middle of the prayer. This is what happens. This is what happens. The prayer becomes nullified, and the intention that he changed to does not start. So therefore, if somebody did that, he has to start over again. So this one, we do not do that. One, he will not do that. One, he will not change his intention from one obligation to another. We understand this? He will not change his intention from one obligation to another. What he can do, a person, is allowed for him to change from an obligatory prayer to the non-obligatory prayer, with the nafil mutlaq. From that, he can change his intention from the obligatory prayer to a non-obligatory prayer that's not ascribed or coupled with anything, in situations where he needs to. Not in an absolute sense, he can't do that all the time, but if he's in a situation where he needs to, and he needs to change his intention, he's started the obligatory prayer, he needs to get out of it before finishing it, then he can change his intention to a nafil al-mutlaq. For example, if somebody was praying alone and then a jama'ah came, he started praying Dhuhr by himself. He looked around, there's nobody around him, so he started praying Dhuhr by himself. After the second rak'ah, a number of people come into the masjid and they start to establish the obligatory prayer of Dhuhr. So now he has the opportunity to catch the obligatory prayer in congregation. So this is a great maslahah and benefit for him. So here in this case, he already prayed 2 rak'ah of Dhuhr, for example. So, or wherever he's at, he's already in the middle of the Dhuhr prayer. So it's allowed for him now to change his intention to a non-obligatory prayer. To a non-obligatory prayer. And then finish that prayer and come join the congregation. Because the intention for the obligatory prayer, there's 2 intentions. And the intention likewise for the specific non-obligatory prayer, there's 2 intentions there. There's intention to pray, and there's the intention to pray that specific prayer. So the one who has the intention to pray Dhuhr, for example, he has the intention to pray, and that prayer is Dhuhr. And the one who is praying the Sunnah of Fajr, he has the intention to pray, and the intention to pray the Sunnah of Fajr, for example. So the one who is in our example, he is praying Dhuhr, he has the intention to pray, and he has the intention that the prayer is Dhuhr. Now in this case, whenever he wants to catch the obligatory prayer in congregation, now he nullifies the intention for Dhuhr and he keeps the intention for prayer. So it's allowed for him, because the intention for Dhuhr includes the intention for prayer. The intention for dhuhr includes the intention for salah, because he intended to pray salah and to make it a specific salah, and that's dhuhr. So therefore it's allowed for him in this case to nullify the intention for dhuhr and just to make it a regular prayer, non-obligatory prayer in the absolute sense, in this case, so that he can catch the obligatory prayer in congregation. So he can catch the obligatory prayer in congregation. Likewise, for example, if there was maybe there's a woman in her house, and she started praying the dhuhr prayer, and then she remembered that she left some food on the stove. She left food on the stove. It's a dangerous situation. So now she's in the middle of the obligatory prayer, but now her heart is worried about the stove or the oven and the likes like this. So now in this situation here, it's allowed for her to change her intention to the non-obligatory prayer and finish that quickly and go take care of her business and come back and finish that and then restart the obligatory prayer. So even if a person, for example, he had the intention to pray dhuhr 4 rak'ah, then he wanted to change it, he could change it. If he only prayed, for example, 1 rak'ah, or he's in the second, he could change his intention to a non-obligatory prayer and just make it 2 and finish briefly. And then go join the congregation, or then she can go take care of the food, and in those examples that we have mentioned. But in general, to change from an obligatory prayer to a non-obligatory prayer, it's not allowed in the absolute sense, just to nullify an obligation. Allah, He says, وَلَا تُبْطِلُوا أَعْمَالَكُمْ, and do not invalidate your deeds. So a person who began praying the obligatory prayer, he should complete it. He should not nullify that for any reason, rather only in certain circumstances. So in the likes of these circumstances, it will be allowed for him. So a person, he will not just stop praying in the middle, rather he will finish his prayer in the proper manner, and he will change his intention, finish the prayer briefly, and take care of the situation. So this is the obligatory prayer. The non-obligatory prayer, that's specific, is a similar manner. To go from a specific prayer to a specific prayer, this one will not be correct likewise. You can't go from one specific prayer to another specific prayer, because the specific prayer, even though it's not obligatory, it has to be identified from the beginning. Similarly to that which has preceded. Although if one was praying a specific prayer, a non-obligatory prayer, he could change his intention to just an absolute prayer and take away that specific intention and finish the prayer like that which has preceded in the example that passed. So if a person, he changed his intention from obligatory prayer to another obligatory prayer, then his prayer will be invalidated. If a person, he changed his intention from obligatory prayer to a specific non-obligatory prayer, his prayer will be invalidated. If he's changed his intention from an obligatory prayer to just a regular non-obligatory prayer, then this is correct in certain circumstances whenever he needs to do that. If a person, he changed his intention from a non-obligatory prayer to obligatory prayer, it will not be correct. It's not allowed to do this. To change from a non-obligatory prayer to obligatory prayer in the middle of the prayer will not take effect. Then the same thing will happen. The prayer will be invalidated. Changing the prayer from a specific non-obligatory prayer to another specific non-obligatory prayer, the prayer will be invalidated with this intention. This intention here invalidates that, because by nullifying the first intention, the salat is nullified, and the second intention doesn't even begin. The second prayer, the intention for the second prayer does not benefit, because a person, he must begin that prayer with that intention. So then it didn't even begin. Also, we have the issue of niyatu al-mufaraqa, يعني للمأموم أن يفارق الإمام. نية المفارقة، مفارقة المأموم للإمام, the intention to break away. The intention for the ma'amum to break away from the imam. Whenever somebody is praying behind another person as the ma'mum, he takes someone as his imam, he has to have that intention, that he's following behind that person. So the one who's praying behind an imam, he has the intention to follow that imam. So this is called niyatul ihtimam. Niyatul ihtimam. He will have the intention to follow behind the imam. So is it allowed to break that intention in the middle of that? Is it allowed to break that intention in the middle of that? This is the issue here. And from the fundamental evidences for this, the hadith of Jabir radiallahu anhu and the story of Mu'adh radiallahu anhu, that one time he was leading his people in the Isha prayer. He was leading his people in the Isha prayer, and he led them in a long recitation. And an individual from his people came and he had needs. And whenever Mu'adh radiallahu anhu, he took a long time in the recitation, the man, he broke away and he finished his prayer by himself. And then whenever the issue came back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he affirmed him upon that. The story is well known. The shahid from that is that was affirmed. The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not order the man to repeat. So if a person is in need, this is allowed. Originally, he will not do that. But if he's in a circumstance where he needs to, it's allowed. Somebody who's praying behind the imam, and then suddenly something happens. He has a problem in his stomach. He has a great need to use the restroom, or gas is about to overcome him, and the likes like this. And it's allowed for him in this case to break away from the imam and to finish his prayer quickly, and to go take care of his business. Except in the case if he thought that if he broke away, he will still finish the prayer in the same time as the imam, because the imam, he already prays a light prayer. So if the imam is already praying a light prayer, then a person, he will not break away from that, because he cannot pray it any lighter than the imam is already praying, for example. As for if he knows the imam is going to take some time and the likes like this, and it's going to affect him, then he can break away in this circumstance. If he has some gas that's bothering him, or he feels like maybe he's going to vomit, or suddenly he feels problems in his stomach and he needs to race to the restroom and the likes like this, then it's allowed for him in this circumstance to break away in his intention and to finish the prayer briefly by himself and to leave. Also, this issue comes into benefit, for example, in this masjid. Sometimes the microphone cuts off. Sometimes the microphone may cut off, and the sisters, they will not know where the imam is. So if the sisters are praying and following the imam from the microphone, from the speakers, they're following the takbirat and the likes like this. This is how they're following the imam, and they cannot see the imam or the ma'mumin. Then if the microphone cuts off, then at this time one of them would just intend to break away from following the imam and finish her prayer by herself. So no need to wonder what's happening, what's going on, if it's clear that the imam, the microphone is not working, or it goes out in the middle of the prayer, and the sister on the other side is not able to identify or hear the takbirat anymore, or follow the imam, then she will not just invalidate her prayer or stop praying and start over. Rather, she will now intend to break away from following the imam and complete her prayer by herself in this circumstance. Also, with regards to praying behind the imam, whenever a person is traveling, we have seen in previous classes that it's allowed for him to shorten the prayer. So a traveler, he will shorten his prayer, regardless of his state, whether he's on the road or whether he is not on the road. He will shorten his prayer. But if he prays behind the imam that is a resident, it's an obligation for him to pray in the manner of the resident. Even if he was praying, for example, dhuhr with the imam, and he caught the imam after the first tashahhud in the third rak'ah. So the person, he's traveling, so he caught the jama'ah in the last two rak'ah. So he will not be able to think in his mind that he can suffice with these two rak'ah because he's traveling. Rather, this is not correct. He has to pray four. Although he's a traveler, now he's making al-ihtimam. He's following behind the imam, and the imam is a resident, and he's praying the prayer of a resident, so therefore he has to pray in the same manner, and he will have to make up those rak'ah. So the one who's praying with the imam, even if he's traveling, he will pray in the exact same manner as the imam. Even if he has rak'ah to make up, he will make them up in that manner. The one who's traveling, he will not pray behind the imam only two rak'ah, even if he only caught with the imam two. Rather, he will make up that which he missed. the Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِنَّمَا جُعِلَ الْإِمَامُ لِيُؤْتَمَّ بِهِ, that the Imam, he was only made to be followed. So the origin is that the ma'mum, he will follow the Imam. And likewise the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned about the prayer, وَمَا أَدْرَكْتُمْ فَصَلُّوا وَمَا فَاتَكُمْ فَأَتِمُّوا, that whatever you catch, then you pray it, and whatever you miss, then you make it up. So this is in general with regards to the resident and the traveler. With regards to the resident and the traveler. Even more specific than that is what is collected by Al-Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah, from the hadith of Musa ibn Salima, rahimahullah ta'ala. He says, كنا مع ابن عباس بمكة رضي الله عنهما فقلت إن إذا كنا معكم صلينا أربعا وإذا رجعنا إلى رحالنا صلينا ركعتين. He said that I asked Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma whenever we were in Mecca, and he said that indeed whenever we're with you we pray four rak'ah, 4 units of prayer, but whenever we go back to our tents we pray 2. قال تلك سنة أبي القاسم. He said this is the sunnah of Abi al-Qasim sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So this is the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, as stated by Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma. So they're asking this question. They're travelers and they're coming to Mecca, and they mentioned that whenever they pray behind the Imam, behind Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, they pray along with him 4. But whenever they pray by themselves, they pray 2. Why is this? And he said, Tilka sunnatu Abil Qasim. This is the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. هذا وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.